And joining our panel is Democratic pollster and strategist Stan Greenberg. Greenberg has written a new book. It's called RIP GOP, How the New America is Dooming the Republicans. In it, he argues that the party's rejection of a changing America is likely to lead to a spectacular crash in next year's election. Greenberg writes, Trump's Tea Party evangelical GOP can't just be defeated. It must face a repudiating, shattering defeat that frees other brands of the Republican and conservatism to breathe again. Find their own Republican candidates, switch loyalties to the Democrats, or perhaps vote for an independent presidential candidate. Stan Greenberg, welcome back to Meet the Press. And I should remind people, when Democrats were in the wilderness before 1992, you were the message maven that got Bill Clinton to focus on it's the economy, stupid. So.
I appreciate that shout out, and I appreciate a time when the Democrats were worried about working people, and Bill Clinton got that, and probably won a lot of rural America in the process.
Okay, so you said, you thought 4 years ago this Republican coalition that was going too far to the right was going to defeat itself, but it didn't.
Right.
What went wrong?
It was saved above all by Donald Trump, who didn't run as a Republican. And the reason I wrote the book was what I think I understood then was you had a Tea Party, evangelical, Trump-dominated party that was at war with a new America that was increasingly diverse, immigrant, and it was reacting against it. And that's the reaction that people failed to notice. There's a reaction amongst Republican voters, secular conservatives, moderate women, independents, pushed off. Right. And so there's a reaction against it. He's running this war on immigrants. And what we've noticed with that is that the country is becoming more pro-immigration as he wages that war. And then finally, he has waged a war on government. For a decade, the country's lived through an attempt to dissolve government and make it not be able to solve any problems. And that has created a reaction, and it plays out in the Democratic primaries, of people wanting to use government to address problems.
Jonah Goldberg, you have been somebody that's been sort of fighting this shifting in the Republican Party. What do you think of his take?
Well, historically, when we get arguments like this, my first response is to think this is an example of the wish being the author of the thought. This may be different because the GOP really does have some severe structural issues going on. The loss of the suburban vote, which in many ways was the real GOP base, is a long-term problem. I do think it's worth thinking about, though, in an era of such negative polarization, where a lot of people are Democrats simply because they hate Republicans, and a lot of people are Republicans because they hate Democrats. If one party dies, the other party could lose its reason to live. And so our politics in 10 years could look very different, because there are a lot of people in the Democratic Party who may leave to find the replacement of whatever comes after the GOP.
Stan, it seems that you are, I was just going to say, in fact, I want to animate this discussion with the debate. You're sort of arguing that electability may not be what people think it is, that actually Elizabeth Warren putting out more plans is actually more responsive than maybe what Joe Biden's doing.
Right. Yeah, because we're dealing with, I think, this transformative moment. I mean, there's real big dynamics that are shaping the election. One of them is the nature of the Republican Party. The second is this attempt to suppress government. The other is this battle against America being an immigrant country. But it's produced a consolidated Democratic Party that wants to vote for somebody that'll bring big change. But the result afterwards, I believe, is not a continuation. Because I think this can't go any further. In other words, I think this polarization has gone to the point where Democrats have grown to be about a 10-point bigger block of voters that is very consolidated, very anti-Trump, and determined for him to be defeated. And I think they want to have an activist government that addresses a whole range of problems. The Republican Party, I believe, will come out of this, have to address fundamental things the way Democrats did after their 1984 defeat.
Amy?
But what will they have to address? That is the... Right, that's the question. Republicans did address what they thought were two big fundamental defeats in 2008 and 2012, right? They came out of that saying, we got to be the diverse party. And the electorate, the Republican electorate said, no, we can win by just running essentially the campaign that Donald Trump did. We don't have to expand the coalition. I guess the question that I have is this repudiation idea. I don't know that that's what 2018 theoretically was supposed to be. And yet, it really wasn't. That Republicans still did very well in red states, and Democrats did really well in blue states and in inner suburbs. But those outer suburbs are still Republican. They have
I don't
okay.
agree with that.
Okay, you don't.
Well, because I think there's a failure to recognize how big the 2018 election was. And some of what we're missing is because the seats that are in play in the suburbs were at the edge of 50% and being winnable. The biggest shifts against Trump came amongst rural voters, came amongst white working class voters, and he's continued to lose support with white working class women after the 2018 election. That meant that state elections could be greatly affected. Senate races could be affected coming in 2020.
You know, Kimberly, I think you've seen this. The Democratic base is just reacting with so much more enthusiasm right now to Elizabeth Warren ideas than they are Joe Biden ideas. And I guess the question is, what wins out?
Well, I think it's still a little too early to tell exactly what it will win out. I think there is a divide within the Democratic Party of some folks who like folks like Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders who want to change things, who want to not just oust Trump, but oust the elements that elected him. And you have other folks who are leaning toward Biden who just want things to go back the way they were right before Election Day. I think the Democrats are still fighting within that, and those motivators are very different.
And Peter, Stan even made the point, it shouldn't surprise people that Democrats are criticizing Obama a little bit because he didn't go big enough.
Yeah. So Obama was always actually a disappointment to the liberals who supported him in 2008, who thought he was something more than he was, right? That he was going to be something more. Remember, he was an empty vessel, and people filled their hopes and dreams into what he was, and he wasn't necessarily what they thought. The identity crisis that Kimberly's talking about inside the Democratic Party is very interesting, and that's the thing that is probably the most important advantage possibly to Trump, other than the economy, if it stays strong.
We will find out in 14 months. Stan, congrats on the book. Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and then click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.